Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some other Social Security benefits. So first up is going to be disability benefits and disability insurance. So for people that have sufficient Social Security credits, this can trigger disability coverage. And the requirements can vary for different situations. So it gets a little bit tricky depending on the specific situation and level of disability, things like that. But generally what we're looking at is that it's looking at a disability preventing the person from doing substantial work for a year or more for this to kick in. And the person is going to have sufficient Social Security credits for this to be applicable. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is adequate to provide all coverage for all income, which is why in the some of the videos about disability insurance, um, there are some discussions that about having disability insurance and kind of covering above and beyond what like Social Security might cover and things like that. Also, Social Security has some family related benefits. So for a former worker receiving retirement or disability benefits, some of the benefits actually extend out to the family as well. So the spouse may qualify for a certain level of benefits depending upon age and or what type of children are involved and things like that. So think typically younger children or children with disabilities, things like that will often relate to the situation. So a spouse may be covered if there are young children or children with disabilities, or if the spouse is above a certain age, or things like that, basically. So it tends to extend out, but there are caveats to that. And then also unmarried children, generally until the month before turning 18, and there are some exceptions for students. So if a student is currently enrolled in like high school, for instance, then there's some wiggle room there. And generally, I think there's an exception. They can receive benefits possibly up until like a couple months after they turn 19, I think. I might be a little bit off, but it gets kind of interesting with some of the rules there for students and if they are, when they enrolled and interesting qualifications, even for elementary students who are like even above the age of 18. And so if you think about that and you're like, probably that would be a disability kind of a situation, probably, something like that. So somebody with a learning disability or something. So I mean, all kinds of interesting caveats and nuances and things like that. But generally speaking, for unmarried children, generally until the month before turning 18, there are some family benefits. But there are some interesting quirks, that nuances and unique circumstances and things like that come into play. And then also survivors benefits. So in this case, this is a situation where the worker that had sort of accrued the benefits or accrued the credits has passed away, and so we have people who are still around. So survivors may be eligible if the deceased worker earned enough credits. So if the deceased person earned enough Social Security credits to qualify, then the survivors may actually be eligible. Now, within that, we're looking at a widow or a widower in certain categories that might meet certain age or prior marriage criteria. So a widow or widower above a certain age didn't remarry prior to age 60. So even if they remarried but not prior to age 60, and they were married for I think the number is 10 years, things like that prior to the death of the person who had qualified, or the widow or widower has young children, or I mean, so there are all kinds of interesting quirks basically that could trigger a widow or widower actually receiving survivors benefits. So if the spouse is not like himself or herself of retirement age, but has young children, then that can trigger basically benefits for the surviving spouse and so forth. So in general, the children of appropriate age. So some of the same kind of things kind of apply here, but I think generally probably looking at around 18 or so, unless as long as they're not married or things like that. Typically, if the parents of a deceased worker were dependent on the deceased worker, and the deceased worker is the primary means of support for the parents, then the parents could actually receive survivor's benefits. And interestingly, a qualifying surviving spouse, so surviving spouse that qualifies to receive survivor's benefits, could actually use that survivor's benefit to delay taking his or her own benefit. And so by delaying taking his or her own benefit, then that surviving spouse could essentially get higher future benefits, and then essentially use the survivor's benefits now, and then basically delay taking his or her own benefits in order to allow those to increase and so forth. Now, if you start thinking that, well, so the spouse might qualify, kids might qualify, all these kinds of things, then like how does that work when the whole family, you got a whole bunch of people that might actually qualify? Well, there is actually a maximum family benefit. And the maximum family benefit is generally going to mean that benefit is limited to 150 to 180% of the deceased worker's primary insurance amount. And so basically that calculation that I discussed in a prior video is done. And then if you start adding up, well, this person's eligible, and that person's eligible, and this person's eligible for survivor benefits, the total amount is basically going to be capped at somewhere in that 150 to 180% typically of that amount overall. Okay, hopefully this kind of brief discussion of some other Social Security benefits has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.